1, 2, 3, 4. Those are numbers, but you already knew that. If you want to know what number you're going to pay each month for your car, use Kelly Blue Book My Wallet on Auto Trader. They're really good at numbers. Auto Trader.
This episode is brought to you by Starry. When you drink Starry Lemon Lime Soda, every sip is a win. Perfect for game time or anytime. It's a crisp, refreshing lemon lime soda that's caffeine-free and bursting with flavor that makes you go, ah. Starry hits different. Find it in stores or online today.
Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny.
Alright, and welcome to Unequal Sequel. My name is Dave. I am one of your two hosts, and welcome to this brilliant podcast.
Yeah, and I'm Rich, and I'm the other host of this brilliant podcast. Think of me as Maverick and Dave as Goose. I'm awesome, and he's dead. No, that's not right.
I mean, it's a spoiler there.
It's a bit of a spoiler for Top Gun if you haven't seen the 35-year-old film.
The premise of Unequal Sequel is very simple. We ask our guests their best sequel, worst sequel, and finally we ask them their dream sequel.
And of course, because it's us, we often drift off and talk about loads of movie stuff in general, really. And, you know, life.
Yeah, and sometimes we do spoil movies, but they're all old movies.
Yeah.
I feel like we have to add that into our introduction.
Yeah, we try not to
now,
spoil new movies that you might not have seen.
Yes. On today's episode, we are joined by Matt from the brilliant podcast, The Sequelisers.
Yeah, this is a really great one. Matt's really, really knowledgeable about his movies. We had a really, really good chat. It's nice to do a cool crossover episode with another podcast. So the Sequelisers podcast is all about sequels as well, so you should definitely check that out. And we're doing this as the first part of a very special 2-part Sequelisers crossover special. So we've got Matt this week and we've got Tim next week.
Tim's the sequel.
Tim's the sequel. Oh, Tim's the sequel. Oh. Nice.
We are very excited to sit down with Matt and chat all things sequels with him.
This is Matt from the Sequelisers podcasts, Unequal Sequels. Enjoy.
Shall we talk about sequels?
I'm ready to.
You're a sequel podcast. We're a sequel podcast.
This is true.
This must mean you like sequels as much as we do.
No, I hate them. Yeah, yes, that is very true. That's very true. I do.
Because when we started this podcast, I found out Rich. I was like, let's do a podcast about sequels. It's kind of, and then I found out Rich hadn't really seen any like sequels.
Well, not that I haven't seen any sequels, but I hadn't seen Godfather Part 2.
Yeah.
I think that was a shock, wasn't it?
Well, there's a thing we discussed in our podcast, the idea that there is a knee-jerk reaction, and it's a fairly sort of human thing to go, what? How can you have not seen X, Y, Z? Is it because I'm human, my time is limited? It's a huge backlog of things to get through. But it is a gut reaction to say, and it's usually in a positive way, like, oh, you've got to say, you'd love it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the fact there is so many in terms of like, if you, especially with horror, if you go to like a horror sequel, it's like, I really enjoyed that. Would you like 9 more? I mean, I didn't think I did, but
yeah, exactly. So I'm a real completist.
Oh, okay.
So if I watch something and there's like a trilogy, I have to watch all 3. I don't want to. I didn't like 2, but if I don't watch them, my brain's going to explode.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of why I avoid sequels a little bit, because otherwise I've got to watch all of them.
I do understand that mentality. I mean, again, as a completionist myself, the people, I got a large DVD and Blu-ray collection. People will say, "Why do you own this?" It's like, it looks weird without it.
Yeah.
And so I have to. It's like, why do you own all the Fast and Furious films? It's like, I mean, it looked weird if 2 was missing, even though 2 is terrible. It's like, why do you own all 5/6 of the Transformers movies? Don't you like maybe 1? It's like, yes, Bumblebee. Why do you own the first 5 then? It's like, because they're there.
Yeah. So do you remember the first sequel you saw? Was it in the cinema or was it?
Right, that's a good question.
Yeah. You'd be amazed how often people's first films were sequels.
That's interesting. I actually don't know if mine is. I mean, I very distinctly remember my first film I watched in the cinema was Snow White, because it was a re-release in the 80s and I was very, very little. I distinctly remember seeing sequels before the first film sometimes, because it was what was on TV. It was what was on Access. And if you, as the eldest of my 2 brothers, everything was sort of channeled through me that way. So I was experiencing things first, obviously. And my parents weren't really massively into films, other than my mum being into westerns like Sound of Music and stuff like that, and my dad being into westerns. So I didn't really have a lot of that sort of, shall we say, guiding hand in cinema. It was just literally what's on. They're connected, that kind of thing. So I have a ton of memories of, I remember seeing I think I saw, Return of the Jedi before any other Star Wars film.
That's very common. Very common.
Yeah, and again, I genuinely think that's just because of our age and being on TV and that kind of thing. And I remember, I think I might my parents to come home from the hospital with a baby brother, or another one, I should say. Just this was sort of like this thing in the woods on TV, and that looks cool. But no, if I'm brutally honest, although I could say, oh yeah, I remember seeing Superman 2, I genuinely can't. I can't remember distinctly thinking this is the first one. It's when you come after the fact to think, Short Circuit 2 isn't just called Short Circuit 2. There's one beforehand, that kind of thing.
Do you remember the first thing you got excited about then?
Probably The Lost World, Jurassic Park. That would have been the first sequel I really got it for. So Jurassic Park came out when I was 9. Unlike things like The Land Before Time has a sequel and The American Tale has a sequel, there'd be various bits and pieces. Disney weren't doing big sequels at that point. So for a young kid, there wasn't a lot out there. You'd be like, oh, I'm looking forward to this. And Star Wars, while it was huge at the time, or becoming quite huge for my generation, there was also a mindset of Star Wars 1 is fun, but for a child's Empire is quite scary. Return of the Jedi starts off again, quite scary and a bit pants, and then goes, oh, now it's all big and stuff, and this is great, the best thing I've ever seen. Boom, boom, boom. But yeah, I genuinely think, having had such a transformative experience watching Jurassic Park, seeing that, hoping to see the Lost World, i.e. more goddamn dinosaurs, it's like, this is going to be great. But again, as we experienced doing Sequelisers and that sort of stuff, massively disappointed and thought I could do better than that.
And that's quite a common answer, actually, as well, I think, is that Lost World, Jurassic Park was one that everyone was looking forward to and then went, oh.
Yeah, I think, again, anything that's had a bit of a touchstone or really gripped your imagination, or to be sort of just lost there. I mean, for example, Indiana Jones is another great one. And Back to the Future, the really key big franchises that everyone would talk about, Karate Kid as well. But at the same time, these were sort of, for me at least, passed down from older kids. It was the 80s films that I was sort of getting the tail end on VHS, and you got the sort of video that you could get. And it didn't make sense why there were two people on the cover of the Back to the Future video kind of thing. And I was like, oh, there's one. What? Okay, this makes much more sense. I'm supposed to watch in a certain order. But with the cinema specifically, because I must admit, and this is true today, the cinema is a very big, important experience. Going to the cinema, the act of going to this darkened room where there's no distraction, you have the biggest screen you've ever sort of seen, you've got the sound system, and you have to focus. If you need to go to the toilet, you run and you come straight back. That sort of mindset. You don't want to miss anything. Do this sometimes now where I'd be like, oh, I missed something. I must have been gone a couple of seconds, but I missed something. Yeah. I'll watch the film again. Go and see another version of it. The idea of there was this huge epic movie about dinosaurs with some of the most revolutionary technology we'd ever seen at the time, which still holds up today incredibly well. They're doing another one. It's like, I cannot wait to get back into the cinema to watch that. And obviously after, like, whatever's next with dinosaurs has to be even bigger, because again, you're a kid, you don't understand how films work. You don't understand they're all exactly connected, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like they have to get better, don't they?
Yeah.
You've seen something when you're a kid, like you've seen something, then the next thing has to be better, and it has to get better and bigger, and you can't understand why it doesn't get better and bigger sometimes.
Yeah, the idea of, was it the law of escalation? Whatever comes back as a sequel has to justify its existence. It cannot just be the next thing in the story. It has to be enough to grip you and push you further and further and further. It's like economics 101 about growth. It's like, well, that's nonsense. But it has to happen because that's how it works. It has to be bigger. I mean, the best example really is Jaws. I think with Spielberg saying, once the shark is out of the box, you can't put the shark back in the box. You can't start the film like, oh, are we going to see it? It's like, and the same thing with kaiju movies. Once you've seen the monster, you can't do what the original film does, which teases it out for a very long time. Again, T-Rex or any of the dinosaurs really in Jurassic Park, you don't see them for so long. The second film can't do that. Yeah. It can't just say, we'll keep it behind and reveal it in a nice sort of epic storytelling narrative way. It punches it all out in one go. And you're like, right, I don't know what the story is, and I'm kind of not happy with anything that's going on. I don't like these new characters or whatever it's going to be, that kind of thing.
And that's why sequel making is such an art.
True.
What is your best sequel ever?
So here's the thing. We did an episode years and years ago on the show about favourite sequels. I remember having a conversation with my co-host saying, go on the show, I don't want to do the same answer again. That's kind of boring. And it's like, but it's your answer. It's the answer. I haven't changed this answer since I was a child. And you're like, yeah, good point. It is the right answer. So the answer for me is Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan.
Lovely answer.
Yeah, for some people. Some people go, ugh.
Who's done that?
Who? Yeah, who does that?
Yeah, no, essentially Star Trek II is is fascinating to me for multiple reasons. For those who don't know, 1982, directed by Nicholas Meyer, Harve Bennett's come on as the producer. Star Trek the Motion Picture was a reactionary thing because Star Trek, the original series, was fine. It ran, it became this sort of, culture of print to a degree. And then Star Wars came out and said, well, Paramount's like, well, what property do we have with that word star in it? And, bang, we have a Star Trek. Oh, that's great. We can bring this back. And the motion picture is made, I think, $45 million, which is huge sum at the time, still pretty big money. It was very long, very boring, and on a certain level, quite interesting on a philosophical point of view. It's like, yeah, sure, probe goes out to space, comes back to see God, and God's us, and we're like, oh, how disappointing. And Spock essentially just flies through a cloud for a while. It's fine as a piece, it makes sense, but it died at the box office, and it was like, this is not doing well. Critics don't like it either. And so there's a famous quote, I think, from one of the producers where Harve Bennett's brought in and he says, yeah, I can make a film with that. He says, right, can you make it for less than $45 million? And he says, where I come from, we can make 5 movies with that. And then he goes off and he's like, I've never seen an episode of Star Trek in my life. So he has to go and do a little research. And he brings on Nicholas Meyer, who's also never seen Star Trek in his life. They go through the original show, come across Space Seat, which is the Khan episode, basically. And they say, bang, there's an open-ended thing there, and there's a villain, because the first film doesn't really have a villain. It has an inquisitive probe, and that's fine, but the audience wants a Darth Vader, it wants the evil machinations of some cackling bad guy. The reason I think it's the best sequel, to this day remains the best sequel, is it's one of the few examples, the sequel being better than the original. And what we've just mentioned, this film doesn't actually escalate. It doesn't go bigger because it can't for the money. It goes deeper in the emotion. So what you end up with is something that is less of a visual spectacle. Motion picture, for what it's worth, when it was done, the director's cut, and it's all very pretty at times, and like, oh wow, you've done a lot here. This thing started saying, well, what can we do with its lo-fi? And they're like, well, we'll take all the costumes from the old film and dye them red, and they'll be the sort of rest of the crew's uniform. We have no money. We'll get the backdrop for Kirk's apartment to be literally the backdrop from the Towering Inferno. That'll do. It was in San Francisco, that kind of stuff. They're literally just stealing what they can from the studio. Just say, we can repurpose this, that'll do. And then they do this beautiful genius idea that carries on for a lot of Star Trek and makes it stand out, which is that this is a naval thing, and these are submarines. These are very slow turning 3-dimensional objects, not dogfights in space. And they have that beautiful various solutions in water filmed in slow-mo for the sort of backdrops of this nebula. And it still holds up really well as the Genesis probe, visualization sequence being cutting edge technology because they can afford that small 20-30 seconds of CGI. And the emotional arc between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy is very strong, as well as an adversary that, again, because Ricardo Montalban was on Fantasy Island at the time, he couldn't get the scheduling to be on screen at the same time as Shatner. So those two, despite being adversaries, and it's like everybody knows Khan screaming and echoing up the night, they never share the screen. Yeah. And that is so amazingly fascinating to how you can do that sort of the idea of what old naval battles would be in a master and commander kind of mindset, that you'd never actually meet eye to eye because those captains are too mad, but they have so much passion and hatred for each other, etc. And yeah, the idea that repurposing how Star Trek sort of was presented, a lot of the more militaristic sort of stuff with the naval aspect, pushing probably a lot more in terms of continuity and things people think of Star Trek now, what is quintessentially Star Trek, from that movie, more so possibly than the original series.
Do you think that's because it wasn't a sequel to the motion picture, it was a sequel to
series.
The episode of the series?
That could be exactly it, yeah.
And that's why it worked.
Yeah.
It didn't have to go bigger than the motion picture because it wasn't a follow-on from the motion picture. It was separate.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and especially considering I think this is the first major motion picture to come out of the back of, or continuation from, a TV series episode, which you don't necessarily need to have seen to enjoy Wrath of Khan, and you definitely don't need to watch the motion picture because, again, half the character's not really making much of an impact. All you need to know is that the ship looks a bit different now, i.e. it's film ready. But you're entirely correct there. That probably does help infinitely because it wasn't necessarily trying to compete with, say, like a Star Wars or even like Black Hole from Disney and things like that, or even the motion picture specifically, the Star Trek the motion picture. It was competing with the TV series, so it looked like it stepped up, and it was more dark and quite terrifying at times and bleak. Again, better than what came before.
You're absolutely right, though, that you don't have to have seen the motion picture and you don't have to have seen the TV show, because I didn't know it was a sequel to the TV show until we talked about it on here, and so I'd definitely never seen it. And in terms of Star Trek movies, it's the only one that massively sticks out for me. I think. Yeah. Possibly 4 after this one. Yeah. It's like, what is it? Every odd numbered Star Trek movie.
Yes, every odd is lackluster or disappointing or just plain shit. Having said that, there is a distinct difference between carrying over a legacy character like Khan for those who know what it means to be important, and for those who don't know to be like, oh, I already know why this guy is evil. I understand his plight because his wife and his, died, and his crew have been abandoned on this thing that, the whole line of like, Kirk never came back to check up on me, that kind of thing. This benevolent hero we've been following around the galaxy, actually in his younger days, bit of a prick. And that kind of, and again, like, literally, I did like, oh, I have a son? Wait, what? And all this stuff is like, he is literally an irresponsible man-child who's grown up a bit and has the fallout from his past. Unlike the J.J. Abrams Star Trek Into Darkness, which is just giving you a nod for the sake of it and saying, my name is Khan. It's like, that means nothing to us. It means nothing to these characters. This is the first time they're meeting. That's purely delivered for lack of a better word, me. So I can go, oh shit, it is Khan. I'm disappointed. And that's something that, again, showing a way that you can continue something cleverly. And this is another thing for sequels, especially when you get something like the MCU, for example, with like the release of Black Widow, which is so prequel, sequel, sidequel kind of thing at the same time.
And midquel, I think Kevin Feige.
Midquel,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. It's a question of, where does this slot in here? Am I going to be left out and left behind? It's like, well, then when you're 23 films deep, yeah, you need a lot of lore here. But for something that's meant to be the second iteration, i.e. the reboot Star Trek or even Wrath of Khan, no, I shouldn't be left behind. You should be establishing as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker, exactly. Not for some big reveal or something sort of twist, which I think the big reveal twist was going to be that Spock's going to die. That was the thing. And the way that's got leaked out to the public, that they ended up having the opening scene with the Kobayashi Maru, all the crew were dying. So everyone sort of went, oh, they probably meant that. Oh, that's what it was. Okay, then I will relax now. It's like, you fools. And again, they wrote that in because I think Nimoy wanted to leave the thing entirely, but had so much fun doing this, just sort of said, is there any way you can write me back in? And that's, again, not only a sequel that is better than the original, I would say better than the TV, which is a hard thing to do because it's 60s television versus arguably 80s cinema, so that's always going to be an unfortunate comparison. But doing less and being more, and more importantly, saving Star Trek from oblivion. Star Trek is it's important to a lot of people, but important franchise full stop. And the fact that it could have just blipped out of existence entirely, if it wasn't for this movie and the success of this movie, both pandering to fans in a way by bringing something familiar, but also understand that not everybody's a fan of Star Trek and understands this television series that didn't get a lot of reruns and things like that. Very cleverly done, in my opinion.
I have to ask, are you a Trekkie?
Yes.
Would you class yourself? Because you're so knowledgeable about the subject.
I tend to be that way with film in general, quite obnoxiously. But yes, I am. I would say this is the thing. I've gotten trouble on the show and on Sequelisers in the past, where I will double down and say, no, Star Trek's better than Star Wars. And they're like, how dare you? And then I'll give justifiable reasons that are like, oh, no, I do get it. And my reason is always, this war, this Star War should end soon, right? Otherwise, nothing's being learned and no one's growing and everything's the same. And it's like, yeah, I guess. And Star Trek isn't always good, but Star Trek has the benefit of being multi-platform, and therefore it can be more, whereas Star Wars always comes back to one family.
They're very different.
Oh,
though,
yes.
That's the thing. Is like they're really, really different. And you hit the nail on the head. Whereas like with essentially Star Trek is a submarine story, isn't it? It's a naval story. It's all about these slow moving, massive, huge ships. Whereas Star Wars is what your mate in his minivan essentially, which is.
I think that's the thing. I was just a comparison. Like Star Trek is very much a school field trip on a submarine, which is like, that should be exciting. Whereas Star Wars is playing with your friends at lunchtime. And I should point out, I use the comparison quite a lot, but I love Star Wars and I love Star Trek. I think that you don't have to literally do this tribalistic mindset of I'm one or the other. It's like, it's more just like the Marvel DC thing. It's like, I just want good content and I want a lot of it. I'm very greedy that way, which is the nature of also sequels. We just want more of the thing. And then we get surprised when it's like, oh, turns out I was full and I didn't want tons of this thing. And you hadn't stopped force feeding it to me.
Did you see this one before you saw motion picture?
Yes, I definitely saw these out of order as well. Because again, as a kid, you sort of see what you can get your hold of when. Probably would have seen, I think, 4 first, because time travel and Wales, easy enough. And then you see, probably should watch, The Search for Spock number 1, because it starts with a sort of like previously on, like, oh, okay, well, I'll go back and watch that one. And that also has a bit of a previously on, like, oh, okay. Whereas Wrath of Khan does not. So I think at that point, my younger years, like single digits kind of thing, I would have gone back and started working through the Star Trek films on the understanding that it wasn't Star Trek Next Generations I was watching on TV. But then Star Trek Generations comes out in the cinema and it's like, oh, Kirk and Picard, oh, this is crazy, this is great. Oh, this is fine at best. Whereas First Contact,
Was it
very good.
love at first sight, or was it
For Star Trek?
or this film in particular? Did you?
No, I think it's
This
like
is a big
with,
statement. Best sequel ever.
Oh no, okay. So to back up what Rich said, I think it's more just things stick with you sometimes, and in a nightmare fashion. I think over the years, my favourite sequel has probably evolved, changed, and shifted. But in the back of my mind, it's always Wrath of Khan. I mean, for example, I know the correct answer is The Godfather Part 2. Because it took elements of the book that wasn't being used in the first one and it put them back in. It expanded the story. It does things better. It's one of the first to do this sort of like parallel tale running sort of simultaneously. It's literally genius cinema. It is one of the best movies ever made. My favorite film, however, actually like favorite movie is The Godfather. People find that surprising. Oh, not Godfather 2. It's like, no, because the first one's a masterpiece. It is literally flawless as a movie. It's a perfect storytelling experience. But again, from an adaptation of a book perspective, Godfather 2. But with regards to Love at First Sight with Wrath of Khan, no, I think it just tends to be when you're a child. And I don't know if this is an experience you can really emulate today without sounding like an old fart. Because when you're a kid and have limited videos, you tend to watch them over and over and over and over. So people say, oh, my favorite Disney film is insert name here. It's like, yeah, because that's what you had on video as a kid. And people don't have access to the entire vault. You had a handful of videos like, oh, I love Fox and the Hound. It's like, who loves Fox and the Hound? It's like, well, we had on video and I watched it with my brothers all the time. It's like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. That kind of thing. And you get to an adult appreciation. So I always enjoyed Star Trek, the various movies. And I liked there were lots of them so I could, watch them on the go. Whereas, again, like with something like Indiana Jones, Star Wars, everything seemed to be like sort of trilogies that would stop or peter out or do a Karate Kid and go to the fourth one. You go, oh, no, I don't. No, you can take that one back, thanks. That kind of thing.
Is there any scenes in the Wrath of Khan that really make it stand out for you?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, obviously, there's the memeable stuff. There's obviously things like, Shatner hamming it up and all that sort of stuff.
So good.
But he is. Well, again, he is and he isn't, in the sense that he very arrogantly controls the set, and it's very much his movie and his child and his ship and his vengeance and his rivalry, etc., etc. And that's Kirk. That's how that tends to go. But the fact that everybody gets sidelined in an interesting way, I think the standout scenes are very much Montalban being an overriding presence. Him screaming, "This is Seti Alpha 5," and turning the audience's expectation of Kirk on its head. And it's little things like that. It's not really visuals. It's not really the stuff that, although the Nebula fight is great, although the reveal of the Genesis cave, that stuff is really nice for the matte painting. They're all cool, but the stuff that really hits home is the interactions. It's the just this ongoing bitterness between two old men and how everyone is being pulled into it. That's what really stands out to me. And it's not even a moment. It's a feeling. And again, that's the 2020s all over. Feelings over ideas. It's the idea of that makes me feel like this, and I can literally from the performance I can understand the history behind it, even though as a kid I wouldn't have seen the original series at that point, so I didn't get the history. And again, because we're talking about a half an hour, 45-minute long TV episode, the history isn't really that much, but it's built up to be so much more. And then things like the question of Savick, played by Kirstie Alley, the are you the next crew? Are you the big Vulcan? And the crew dying at the start, and the whole Kobayashi Maru, and the idea of the unwinnable test. I think the thing that really sort of speaks to fans, and at least me as a fan, that they definitely picked up obviously in both of Abrams' Star Trek films, is the idea of someone being so arrogant and so unfortunately proven right in a weird sense of just experience example. The idea of, I don't like the unwinnable scenario. It's like, this is designed to test you. It's like, well, how did you pass it? I'm the only person who passed it. How? Cheated. I reformatted the test. And it's like, why? Because I don't believe in it. And then you see later how he applies that sort of thing. And it's the idea that this unwinnable scenario will always be faced. He doesn't really confront its fear. He just postpones it. And that's why in the next movie, when his son dies, he doesn't have an answer because he's been cheating his way through life. And then when he finally is hit by something important and powerful, he has no idea how to deal with it. So it's the things that set up and fall across, and again, the episodic nature of the storytelling. It's this, I've got a bit of a cliche here to say the seed, considering it's based on Space Seed, but the seeds of what's to come and the seed of what Star Trek can be, that stands out to me. Which is a very long-winded say of saying I like that bit where that happens.
I like Kirstie Alley. I think Kirstie Alley is the
I'm so annoyed she didn't come
key
back.
of this whole movie. Yeah, and you're right, actually. I think with that, she almost makes it kind of possible because they explain to her all the things that they want to explain to the audience.
Yes, entirely. She's the surrogate.
And she's the vehicle through which they kind of explain the whole story. Yeah. And I think she's really important. And you're right, I'm annoyed she didn't come back.
Well, it's frustrating because she's recast in the third film, and then the idea is this in the sixth film. Her name has skipped my mind. Kim Cattrall. Kim Cattrall plays the character who's the eventual. The idea is that she's this character, is another Vulcan who brings, works with the Klingons to bring this thing down. And it's like, but if it had been the original intention, as it were, that Kirstie Alley would have been in the second film, then in the third, and then brought back for the sixth to be this ultimate gut punch traitor, and for Spock to have to deal with that would have been amazing. I mean, it's already good as an impact as it is because it's the whole betrayed by your student, as it were, who has different political ideology, as it were, but that would have meant so much more. And I think Kirstie Alley's great. I think she does such a good job. But then again, she got big. She got big real fast. And I get it.
This episode is brought to you by Tinder. Cuffing season is in full effect, which makes Tinder the place to be right now. There's a new wave of folks coming back to the app ready to find love, fun, or just a new friend. And if you're worried about never meeting up with your matches IRL, don't be. 1.5 million Tinder users go on dates in person every week. Explore all of the possibilities for yourself. Tinder. It starts with a swipe. Download Tinder today.
What sequel, not the worst sequel, the one you've most been disappointed by? So one you just had high hopes for, and then you've watched it.
Yeah, there's so many of these. Okay, so weirdly enough, there actually are quite a lot, and this is one that evolves a lot because every time I get my hopes up, I'm like, oh bloody hell, and it gets dashed very quickly. Weirdly enough, being a goth little kid when I was younger, I think it's Queen of the Damned.
That's a out there answer.
It's a weird one. So Queen of the Damned is definitely one because I remember being, I must have been 14, 15, whatever it was when I finally saw Interview with the Vampire, and I really enjoyed it. It was like, wait, this is a big, and this was the thing people sort of, to a bit of context, in the 90s, there was this huge wave of, 30s nostalgia and 60s nostalgia. So you had Austin Powers being the 60s side of things. 30s, you had all kinds of stuff off the back of the resurgence of like Tim Burton's Batman in 89. So you went up with things like, oh, Batman's a huge hit. What do we do next? We'll do The Phantom and The Shadow. And you're like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, old 30s serial comics. That was like, well, that's what they want. It's like
Dick Tracy.
Yeah, Dick Tracy. But I grew up with that stuff, and I did enjoy it. I was like, this is great. This is fantastic. I'm enjoying all of this stuff. There was at the same time this sort of yearning for another sort of revival, which is gothic horror. So you had Bram Stoker's Dracula from Coppola, you had Kenneth Branagh doing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and what was going to be The Mummy, but took a very different turn with the action thing, still great though. But Interview with the Vampire was a similar thing. It was like this gothic horror romance thing with huge stars. Just the fact that you get Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise in the same movie, and Kirsten Dunst sort of very early role from her, and Antonio Banderas as well, and it was just like this very graphic and mopey 90s slog from Neil Jordan. I really enjoy it. I think it's great. And to know they were doing another one, thinking, great, I can't wait to see this. And it's like, I think 2001, 2002 when it came out. Yeah. And it's like, right, we've got none of the original cast. I'm like, shit, that's going to be, who are you replacing Tom Cruise with? It's like, Stuart Townsend. So it turns out he wasn't going to be Aragorn, so he's now doing this. I'm like, who? And it's like, and obviously it became a buzz because Aaliyah was in it, and she obviously tragically died before it came out in a plane crash. And it's like, well, that's awful. And for the sort of like, the kid in me is like, oh, wait, the soundtrack's been done by Jonathan Davis of Korn. This is going to be amazing. And it's these, continuation of these books about sort of the vampire Lestat being in a rock band, as well as this sort of ancient sort of vampire queen. Think, oh, this could be very, very interesting. And then you watch and think, oh, this is really, really, really bad. This is awful. And the reason I say that rather than The Matrix Reloaded, which is another very, very big answer, is because it came out just before it. And yeah, no, I've been disappointed so many times. I think by the time I got to my sort of teenagers of 16, 17 in like 2000, I prepare myself to be disappointed. I try my hardest to go in as neutral as possible. No one's really neutral. No one's ever unbiased, but you try and temper that as best you can. Yeah. So after Queen of the Damned, I've never been the same.
I've got to be honest, I've never seen Queen of the Damned.
You don't need to.
I know Aaliyah's in it. I know it's a sequel to Interview with the Vampire, which I really like. Yeah. I really like Interview with the Vampire. But I've just never seen it. Again, I think it just came out at a time where I was not watching lots of movies.
No, there are so many things I'd be like, Now, to be fair, it didn't do very well, but it's worth a watch. You're not going to enjoy it, but it might be worth watching just to see what you think of it, or just to see how terrible it is with friends, that kind of thing. But no, it's just so ham-fistedly. It might be worth a watch just to see how badly it's done in terms of how it is such a tonal whiplash. Outside of that, no, it's just very, very bland,
love it.
very weird.
So that's not your worst.
No.
Let's go on to the worst now. So what is your worst sequel ever?
So here's the thing. If we're being anybody who's like, long-term sequelizers listen think, oh, he's going to say Son of the Mask, because Son of the Mask is one of the worst films ever made. However, that's not what I'm going to say. But before I actually get into my least favorite sequel, the worst sequel, if you will, Son of the Mask, or The Mask 2, the follow-up to the Jim Carrey film with Jamie Kennedy, is literally the worst film and sequel. It is appalling. It's badly made. It's terrible. As a follow-up, it's awful. It just struck all the wrong tone. It's dire. It's not even enjoyable. It's the thing of nightmares. However, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is the worst. Now, because I've just sat here just fawning and gushing over Star Trek, I'm going to be called out. Also, anyone's going to say, hang on, that film was mediocre. It wasn't as bad as Son of the Mask. It's like, I think you'll find it is.
I don't think I've seen Son of the Mask either.
Oh, again, do I recommend that to you? Oh.
I want to know, is it worse than Alien vs Predator 2? And then 2, is it worse than Batman and Robin? Because I've had to watch both of those in this podcast, and they're literally two of the worst films I've ever seen.
The simple answer to both is much worse. Son of the Mask. I'm
gonna have to watch it.
Yeah, Son of the Mask is notoriously off the chain stupid. So The Mask in the mid-90s was very fun, launched Jim Carrey's career effectively, really good CGI and things like that, sort of Tex Avery cartoon sort of style. And again, very much sold on the chemistry and charm of Carrey, and he didn't want to come back for a sequel.
Very different to the original story.
Oh, yeah,
right?
the comic was
the original
dark.
story is that Stanley Ipkiss puts the mask on and becomes a serial killer.
Precisely, yeah, and dies at the end because of the horror he's inflicted on everybody. Exactly. No, the Son of the Mask one, it went very much down the kid-friendly cartoon route. Every time they do something that feels like it makes sense, it comes off really badly. And even like minor implications, you think to yourself, no, actually, now I'm thinking about this in detail, that's actually genuinely horrifying. There are so many examples of just like, I'll just tell you like bits of scenes and think, no, that can't be in the movie. So there's a kid's film called The Son of the Mask, wherein Jamie Kennedy, this loser who cannot literally grow up, he's a sort of, again, very much man-child kind of thing, this Arrested Development character, but he's got an incredibly patient, supportive partner, and he basically puts on the mask, goes to this big work event, comes back, impregnates his wife, and we see all the sperm with little mask faces traveling down. It's like, no, I'm good without this, thanks. And it's like, it's terrifying. You think, did I see that? Did that happen? And then I think the baby's screaming, and inside the scream is Odin, played by Bob Hoskins. It's very bad. It's very, very bad. Anything I could say about Rise of Skywalker is going to seem tame by comparison. But Son of the Mask is abysmal. I would say watch it as a challenge, but at the same time, I don't want to put anyone through that. That's torture for most people. So I wouldn't recommend it. But to claw us back, the reason Rise of Skywalker is worse. Not in a actual clinical, actual analytical way. Because critically speaking, of course, it's not worse. It's a very functional film. The production design is great. The performances are good. It shouldn't be slated. But it's the waste of potential. It's the fact that not only, and I'm probably echoing words from previous episodes and possibly future episodes, it's the gut punch of frustration. Yes, okay, a lot of people didn't get on with Last Jedi, but with Rise of Skywalker, it doesn't say anything. It doesn't try to push the thing forward. And every single turn, everything it sort of presents to the audience feels either like a pandering to somebody who isn't going to be impressed anyway, or alternatively, it's a sort of weird workaround to try and fix the last film out of spite. And you have this open pissing contest, and you think, I, as an audience member, don't like this, and none of it makes sense. And I recently rewatched it for our show, and I have this sort of thing when I'm doing the rewatch, because I've seen almost everything we're fixing, as in the original and the sequel. And I'm like, well, I already know this scene, I'll skip that bit. I don't need to see that again. And if I'm really enjoying something, I'll notice how I don't skip any of it. So, for example, we did a prequel season watching The Thing. The Thing is a great movie, wonderful movie. Didn't skip a single bit of The Thing. I love The Thing through and through, John Carpenter movie. There is a prequel called the thing, very unhelpful. And I didn't skip as much as I thought. I was actually engrossed and enjoying it quite a bit. It's quite functional. It's very much trapped by what it needs to be to get to the point at the end of the movie where it starts the other movie. And you're like, okay, well, actually, that's not nearly as bad as I'd expected. But with regards to, I mean, Force Awakens, I only skipped the Rathtar scene because it kind of goes on a bit too much. Last Jedi didn't skip very much. Canto Bite stuff, yeah, it could have been better handled, whatever. I know people are going to all that. I didn't skip any of Rise of Skywalker, but only out of a sort of test to myself to see if I actually enjoyed any single scene. And it's going to sound hyperbolic, but I don't enjoy any of it. I don't think there's any good scene. So someone say, oh, I really like this moment. This is my favorite moment. It's a bad film, sure, but I like this bit. And it's like, what bit do you like? And I can probably trace it back to a couple of scenes before and or after and say, no, because that doesn't make sense in this universe. Yeah. So it's the gesture from like Adam Driver saying, okay, sorry lads, that kind of thing. When he passes the lightsaber gets past him, people say, oh, I love that moment. He fights off against the Knights of Ren. It's a defiant, he's changed. It's like, okay, first of all, the Knights of Ren, despite Abrams building them up and Johnson forgetting to do anything with them, and then Abrams also doing nothing with them, didn't really have an impact. Secondly, when Ben Solo runs in with the jump on the chain, ow, great, that's fine. I enjoyed that bit, but that's because Adam Driver's a good actor. And then he has a gun shooting all these like First Order Sith people that he then suddenly loses so he could be unarmed so that Rey can pass the lightsaber to him. He's like, you've manufactured this for no reason. There's nothing, even a good, cool nod, just a moment doesn't make sense. The whole I am all the Sith, I am all the Jedi doesn't actually work because I am all the Sith is literally that arrogant, selfish, I am everything, I am all of it, I am everything. Whereas the Force is supposed to be like, no, everything has its place and balance and order. So I am all the Jedi shouldn't be, I am a Jedi makes more sense, but they wanted an I am Iron Man moment from Endgame. And the whole idea, but 2 lightsabers will stop your lightning that can fry every ship in the sky. And also you're making me think about Revenge of the Sith now, because Revenge of the Sith, he gets burned as unlimited power. I don't understand. There's so many problems. And also the whole presence of the Emperor invalidates all of the growth from Anakin Skywalker. There's so much that I can't even just enjoy a little bit. And C-3PO, for example. I'm going to rant here, boys. C-3PO, for example, I don't particularly like C-3PO. I don't like him at all much, but at the same time, I enjoyed his performance in this one. The rewrite sort of thing, I think that's quite funny. It worked quite well. But knowing how chaotic this film was, knowing they had no plan, knowing that going from the behind the scenes, that no one was happy with it, that everyone had sort of ideas and, just from Boyega's point of view and Oscar Isaac's, and to be fair, Daisy Ridley as well, just there's nothing there. The only people that get a bit of redemption is Adam Driver's character, which people did and didn't want. The fact that he's, again, unfortunate. We talk about being boxed and core with contracts, also in death and things like that. Carrie Fisher's gone. What do? Just rope around some extra scenes we've got left over. Did you want to use some of the scenes from Last Jedi? No, because I didn't shoot them. It's like, well, don't be petty. If you're writing these scenes to make it work, and then her death means nothing. Chewbacca getting his medal, which just signals to fans. I mean, I know, like Carl Sagan said it in the 70s, and fans saying, "Oh, well, where's Chewbacca's medal?" It's like it doesn't matter. So it's a frustration. It's an oddity, but it doesn't actually bear relevance if he gets a cool thing to do later. If he gets a fake out where he sort of dies and doesn't die, that doesn't mean anything. There's so many problems, and every time I think to myself, that's not a bad idea. For example, like, oh, well, Oscar Isaac's character's got a bit of a dark past. He's not just this well-cut sort of dude. It's like, well, no, he wasn't. That's the whole arc of Last Jedi. We know he isn't this kind of, clean-cut character. It's like, yeah, I know. It's like, oh, but I was also a spice runner, so he's a drug dealer, basically. Kind of, yeah. And this is my drug dealing days. And as Jack on Sequelisers point out, because he's big up on the canon and lore, when Disney bought out Star Wars, they said, right, we're doing away with the expanded universe. Now, that annoyed a lot of people, but I understand from a company point of view. You don't want all these things you have no control over being bound to it. You say, right, well, or if it's on screen in a movie, it counts, that kind of thing. And they put out their own new comics with Marvel, with Marvel, which are supposed to be canon and yet has a different background for Poe. Poe Dameron's family were all in the Resistance and all pilots and stuff. I was like, no, I was a spice runner. It's like, wait, so you're telling me that you had canon and you actively ignored it and all this stuff. It is a very, very frustrating movie. It's an exceptionally well-made movie, but it's so frustrating because it's not only the last of his trilogy, it's the last of this 9 Skywalker saga. Whether you like the idea that Rey has no parents, whether you like the idea that, the universe heard a call to come save, the resistance and nobody came, whether you like that or not, you have to have a clever way of bringing it back. Nothing wrong with bringing it back. You can have everyone turn up at the end, that sort of, the Two Towers moment where Gandalf rises over the hill on the 3rd day. That's great. We love that stuff as audience members. We want that. But you have to make it work. You have to actually tell me how it works. Otherwise, any bit of, unless you're enjoying it purely on a surface level of, wow, big ship, great fun. Otherwise, you're getting nothing from it.
I've never been on quite such a journey as I have with this film. I actually quite like the beginning.
Sure.
Like, I actually enjoy the beginning. Really excited about the start. And it steadily goes downhill, and to the point where I'm actively sat in the cinema, furious.
Yeah.
Absolutely fuming.
I remember the moments of... I think I had on the show previous as well, the amount of people saying, fuck off, at the end of the whole Rey Skywalker stuff. Yeah.
That's exactly my reaction.
It's such a weird... And again, I can't stress this enough. The Rise of Skywalker. I don't think the title makes any sense. Rise of the Skywalker, and recalling the Jedi, just naming them all Skywalkers from now on, that would make sense. That would be an easy thing to do. Like, can't do Jedis anymore because they were all clearly, Luke told me they were all kind of useless at the end of the day, and even at the height of their power, they let this all slip back to this awful... They were manipulated. We have to be something new, something different. Cool, great idea. No,
The title even annoys me.
Yeah.
Rise of something is the first in a trilogy, not the last.
Precisely.
I don't want something rising at the end.
Yeah.
That's a zombie.
Kill it. Well, that's the thing. Much like I said about... And this is why I sort of settled on this one, because again, I had lots of ideas like, I'm going to say, God, I'm going to say Rise of Skywalker, and I can't not say Rise of Skywalker. Maybe it's just because if you ask someone who's not really a fan of films, what's your favourite movie? They'll tend to say the last one they saw. And they'll say, like, oh, I love this movie. Fast 9. It's like,
Ever.
Favourite movie? Yeah. It's like, yeah. It's like, because I watched it and it's in my head still. But the point is that much like Star Trek Wrath of Khan saved Star Trek, Rise of Skywalker nearly killed Star Trek. It stumbled with Solo. It was a very troubled production, and they obviously pulled the plug on the Boba Fett film, which became Mandalorian, all the various spin-offs that come out of it. But
thank God for Mandalorian.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, that's the thing. And then that because that was dealt with under a rock and you could deal with it. But then also now Mandalorian's like, Disney's got its eye on it, and it's like, hang on a minute, what are you doing over here? It looks really successful. Can I have a piece of that? Can I make 9 of them, please? And it's like, good God, you were doing that with the movies, and you kind of bugger them a little bit. I think Rise of Skywalker is, and will continue to be, fine for a lot of people. And for me, for one of the most expensive films of all time and one of the biggest closes of one of the biggest franchises ever, fine is not enough. You can't just punch out mediocrity and say, well, I had some ideas. The Emperor had to come back because he's a big thing in the first part 3s of the first 2 trilogies. And like, I get you're doing the George Lucas rhyming thing where things come back, but this doesn't work. Narratively, this makes no sense. And you feel that you're answering a very small amount of fan backlash in a way that is counterproductive to legacy. Nobody cares about these questions in 10 years' time. They'll be like, wow, that was a crap ending. And that'll be it, unfortunately.
God,
It makes me angry
as well.
Yeah. Everybody's... Yeah, I don't. There are elements I can almost make sense with, like the whole force healing's a thing now. Yeah, sure, fine, whatever. I'm okay with that. That works. She healed a snake. She can heal this guy. Again, Abrams has a way of coming back to a franchise and sort of killing the franchise. So, for example, in The Last Jedi, Johnson got a lot of flack for the whole force projection across planets. And it's like, you can't just do that. And he pulled out this textbook, very famous on Twitter, and said, actually, there's a Lucas sort of canon thing that you can force project this image. And because Luke is such a great, powerful Jedi, this is what he's done. He bought enough time to do this, and it reignites the galaxy and blah, 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 blah. Sure, I understand that. That's great. And the idea that there's this astral projection between these two characters, this conversation between Rey and Kylo. Okay, cool. Wait, at one point, he had water in his face. It's like, yes. From the planet Acto or Achto? Well, I mean, it might be just more, metaphorical kind of thing. No. It must be actual water that's transported across the galaxy. And then Abrams says, right, so we can transport things everywhere through these great moments. And it's like, right. And the same way that Kylo's trying to figure out where Rey is. And it's like, well, she's got the dagger, which is in your ship. So the dagger, which points to things, the Indiana Jones knockoff sort of throwaway thing. In the same way that in Into Darkness, just as a cool image, as a cool thing, because he's like, oh, I like the idea of doing that. I'll throw my hand into this. He says, well, you know, you can't track Harrison, which would later become Khan by Benedict Cumberbatch, because he has this attack on Starfleet, you know, command, and then he teleports to the Klingon homeworld. Can't go there. It's like, sorry, he teleports to another planet. It's like, yeah, then you don't need spaceships. You've killed Star Trek, you idiot. And he does the same thing with this. It's like, well, hang on. So Kylo brings Rey back from the dead. Yes. So if that's the case, I know you talk about it in like, you know, that was the whole thing about the Emperor couldn't bring people back from the dead, which is why he lied to Anakin, and it was all a cunning ruse. And yet he's brought back from the dead because path, unnatural, blah, blah, blah. And Rey is resurrected. So, and also again in Into Darkness, he cures death with the tribbles again. It's like, what are you doing? Stop wrecking this going forward. It's that classic, it will look cool, I'll do this. And having no impact on how that will actually have a causality for the rest of things going forward.
And I think that's our worst. That's the crime of the sequel makers, is not respecting what has gone before, not understanding the source material, and that is the absolute. We've got that kind of down on these few episodes we've done of this podcast. Is the worst crime you can commit as a sequel maker is not respecting the source material.
I think all the rules that we've learned in the last few episodes, and probably you guys on your podcast, I think Abraham breaks every single one of them.
All of them, yeah.
He does.
Everything.
He genuinely does. I mean, things like, if you think about some of the greatest sequels of all time, and the most contentious, which is better kind of thing, like Alien and Aliens, that takes the baton and runs with it and changes genre as it does. It skips lanes.
Yeah.
That's genius. That's when, in the way that both of them can parallel exist, and you can say, you can have a legitimate argument which one is better and not actually be able to win that argument. Like I said about The Godfather Part 1 and 2, even to be fair, like Terminator 1 and 2, it's like, well, this has got better this has got better that. It's like, well, no, actually one's an action, one's a sci-fi horror kind of thing. They're very different paces. They work in respect of each other kind of thing. And a lot of contemporary sequels don't do that. I mean, for example, love or hate them, the MCU, which is very tricky to call them sequels because they're more episodic now. It's more like television and comics in that regard. But they do kind of respect what came before because they know fans are so deep in the lore. They know what's come before is, I mean, obviously we know that they can just say, and that doesn't exist, and that doesn't matter. And we recast this person, and that person's in this. Don't worry about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's not a problem. That sort of thing. And that's fine because the bigger picture still works. The nuance and the minutiae being a problem, yeah, okay, it's frustrating, but it doesn't matter too much if the whole is entertaining. Unfortunately, with something like Rise of Skywalker, for a lot of people, it was entertaining enough. They got what they wanted out of it. They got a big Star Wars.
I liked the first hour,
Yeah,
I think the first kind of hour or so when I'm thinking, hey, well, Finn's going to have something he's got to reveal. What is he going to tell us?
Yeah.
What's his secret? I've got to tell you something. What?
I don't want to be in these films anymore.
Yeah. I'm not doing this shit again.
It is interesting because it is. You're right. It is very frustrating. They start with a really good, immediate rest kind of thing, which is ball rolling. Kylo's on the rampage. The Emperor's back. Moving on, and they've got this code from which is a data transfer that takes a couple of seconds. It's
an adventure. It's setting up the kind of romp across space kind of thing that I thought it was going to be, and then it just
fizzles
all fell
fast.
apart.
Yeah. You should start this kind of film when the scripting with a checklist of what you need to do. What are the loose ends? And more importantly, because of this kind of thing, what are the loose ends from the first 6 movies that we need to fix? What do people need to have? And they have a moment kind of like that with the whole, we kind of want cameos from all the cool dead people that we like in terms of like the various Force ghosts. But China hates ghosts on film, so we'll just have some voices. And it's like, right, so they changed it.
Is that why?
Apparently, yeah. It was they're going to just actually appear behind them and all be, sort of presence. But very famously, apparently, it was either like the Chinese market's like, no, I don't like seeing ghosts on film, thank you very much. And because they're so heavily courting that market with something that can be cut out in the same way that the gay kiss in Rise of Skywalker was so background that you could cut it out and you wouldn't notice it at all. I know that Isaac and Boyega were pushing for Finn and Poe to be gay characters, gay couple, and that'd be great. And it's like Disney went, no, because we like saying with the first this big open thing. And it's like, yeah, but you're not. If you can cut out,
I'm really getting annoyed about how this we've got gay characters in films, and you're like, well, you haven't really. It happened in Endgame, that the director, the character happened. Oh yes, happened in Rise of Skywalker, happened in Soul, and I completely missed it. The Pixar film recently, just no one's.
That's true.
Yeah,
I missed that too.
Yeah, that's the point. They're doing it as a background sort of consolation because they want to be patted on the back, like, oh, aren't we really progressive and really good? Reward us with your money. Because at the end of the day, it's a calculation. Again, it's talking very clinically because we love films and films are great and we love the experience of it. But it's a business, and because it's a business, they're trying to gauge what the market says, and that's why you get with Pride Month, companies will happily slap rainbows on their stuff and then take it away a month later. And it's like, we did that now. I'm done playing with this. Thank you.
And also slap rainbows on their stuff in the West and then not put rainbows in their stuff in the Middle East or in China.
That's exactly it. It's principle on paper, effectively. But they still expect to be rewarded with because again, the old phrase was 4-quadrant demographic. The idea you want to get male and female of a certain age. And there's like a bracket. I think it's like over and under the 25 sort of thing. That's the sort of the 4 quadrants. And it's like, how do you get what's called a 4-quadrant release, i.e. appeals to everybody? The answer is you don't appeal to everybody. You make a film that's good with a good story, and people will go, I'm a hideously bigoted individual, but I really want to see this movie because everyone's watching it. It's great. Maybe I'll change my mind and it will change my opinion. That kind of thing. You want to, learn and grow that experience. I think it was Bob Iger, I think, for Disney in the past, who said, we're not here to make art. We're here to make money. And if we have to make art on the way, that's fine. And it's like, oh, that's an interesting business model. Unfortunately, it worked and still does work to this day. But it is very frustrating when you have them actively patting themselves on the back in certain countries. And I think Jack Whitehall in the new Jungle Cruise film, it's like, oh, now it's really our first open gay character. In addition to the first open gay character you had in Beauty and the Beast.
That's another one.
Yeah.
So open.
It's really frustrating. And again, this is why this film makes me so angry. There are so many aspects and elements that if you gave it to, I don't want to say a fan, because I don't think fans are always the right people to fix things sometimes, myself included. But somebody who can, that's why I said, for example, Nicholas Meyer and Harve Bennett for the Wrath of Khan. They weren't fans of Star Trek. They just could see logically where it could go next and became one of the best and most appreciated Star Trek things because they came from outside. Now, in a way, Star Wars sort of needed that. And yet someone who would respect what came before, which again ended up being Favreau with Mandalorian, and everyone went, this is great. He's not called Boba Fett, but it's basically Boba Fett. And then they brought Boba Fett into it. So yeah, but I genuinely feel Rise of Skywalker is going to be one of those things that over time is going to become more and more and more sort of frustrated and less looked upon with any affection.
And this is the same for Star Wars as it is for The Mandalorian, is that would be a great TV show if it wasn't Star Wars.
Yes,
true. It's essentially a samurai movie which was copied to make a Western, which has been copied to make Star Wars.
Entirely.
It would be a great movie, whatever. It was a great Kurosawa movie, and they've made it into a great TV show. It's
entirely, and I think that's the key thing. It is the idea of if you are, and it sounds so cliche to say this, but it's genuinely true. If you come up with a good story and a compelling reason to get on board with these characters, and hopefully, in the case of science fiction, lush visuals that will draw us in, whether it is like Star Wars, where it isn't, it's like, oh, what kind of amazing worlds we're going to see. Science usually beat up and looking like shit, and that's kind of the point. It's not this amazing utopia. It's something that's quite scrappy, and we kind of love that because of what it comes out of it. But if you don't have that in the first place, and you're just doing this to try and just sort of be a tick box exercise, it will always fall apart.
Well, what's
always.
the point?
Yeah.
Money!
Oh, Dave, that was bleak.
Well, I was in denial when I first watched the film. I watched it. I was like, no, it was good. And then over time, I've slowly learnt to hate it. Over these conversations we've had about it on our podcast.
Of course, I would offer a small lifeboat, and it is a very minor one, but it's a very important one. And I bring it up on Sequelisers all the time. There is a difference, a very, very key difference between enjoying something and it being good. Yeah. So, for example, you can say, this is a great film. It's like, is it? No, but I love it. Or alternatively, this is a wonderful film. I don't enjoy it, but I can appreciate why it's good. So when people get very personally offended and attacked, saying, oh, what's your favorite film? Oh, I really enjoy this. That's shit. That's a terrible movie. How the hell can you enjoy that? That's not the case. But when they say, if you say this is my favorite film, I will never counter that. I'll say, oh, that's cool, because that's your opinion. If you say this is the best film, I will always have a retort, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Because
I love the Fast and Furious movies. I love all of them.
Sure.
I even love 2. But I know it's not a good film. I just love it.
That's fine.
It's
and there's nothing
fun.
wrong with that. And people like literally gritting their teeth saying, well, you know what, Wrath of Khan was a piece of shit and Rise of Skywalker is fine. You're ruining it for me. It's like, that's fine. You can still enjoy it. Unless I'm highlighting problems that cause you to enjoy it less, in which case, we're right.
Yeah, that's all right.
Bleak, sorry.
I'll carry on my questions.
Happy to have me on anytime.
Which film was so good that got a sequel, but you don't think it needed it?
Oh, God. That's a very good question. Damn.
The good example is The Matrix.
Yeah.
Because nothing needed The Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah.
I always say Jaws, but then...
No, Jaws,
Jaws
again, that's a good example. I think, weirdly enough, just because we've been doing this recently on the series, and it very much jumps to mind, Starship Troopers.
Perfect, yeah.
Starship Troopers is a really interesting satirical movie that didn't find its audience because it didn't really understand what it was about, that only really found its legs after 9/11. And people went, oh God, there's so many similarities that we didn't see coming in this rise of fascism and populism. Oh God, wait, Doogie Howser is a space Nazi? I don't think this is a good thing. Hang on, what? So but it was very cleverly done, but I think the sort of much sort of purported sentence over the recent years has been that Starship Troopers is misunderstood. I think no, people get it now. At the time they didn't, but they do now. But the sequels, holy crap, leave it alone. Just it needs once. The whole point of how that film ended with like they'll keep fighting and they'll win. It's like wow, that's again the Star Wars mindset. It's like this war is never going to end because humans are awful. We're just going to keep going to space and keep conquering, being the worst. We are the bad guys of this thing, and that's kind of the point. That did not need a sequel. Everything that came after was obviously shoddy as hell, but even if it was good, I would have been disappointed now, I think still.
I'm one of about 35 people that saw Starship Troopers in the cinema, and I really love it. Yeah. I really enjoy it. And I think you're absolutely right. For me, there's a Mitchell and Webb sketch where they're dressed as Nazis and they're talking about all the things. And you know, our caps have got skulls on them. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, are we the baddies? And that's the point, the revelation you have in Starship Troopers is we're the baddies. Yeah. We're not the heroes in this movie.
No, entirely. And that's the point. But the problem is that it's so good at what it does that you end up going, yeah. No. I will give you two very brief other ones just to be a bit more highbrow. Speaking of Kurosawa, Yojimbo is an amazing movie. Sanjuro is fine. I didn't need it. The crossover of Yojimbo and what was his name went out? Zatoichi. That one, for example, which is just crossover two big franchises in Japan in the 60s, didn't need it. They're not bad. They're actually really good films. But that's another example of unlike the Starship Troopers one, where it's like they're all good, but I kind of didn't need any of them after Yojimbo. That was just magnificent on its own. Didn't need it.
And that's what you don't need from a sequel, right? You need something else. It can't just be more of the same. It has to be different.
Yeah. So, and talking about different, I think this is going to lead on quite nicely that me and Rich are both wanting to talk about your dream sequel.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I've been desperate to talk about this film. I'd not seen it before.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of monster movies in general. And I don't even know what I'm going to say.
Let Matt introduce it, and then we'll hear his thoughts for a sequel, and then we'll ask many questions. So, over to you. Over to you, Matt.
So sticking with science fiction, but in a different way here. So the 2016 movie Shin Godzilla, very divisive movie in the fact that it was huge in Japan, made a fortune in Japan. It's equivalent to that sort of budget, and was critically praised. Some of it didn't translate well, not literally in terms of obviously translation, but in terms of cultural notes about bureaucracy and also big, derpy, weird Godzilla. So, for those who don't know, it's obviously Godzilla's been going since 1954, and Godzilla's a weird one in that no matter where it is, no matter where, if it's a Western release or one in Japan or anything like that, it starts off with a really serious message. It's always like a really serious message about atom bombs or nuclear, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster or climate change, as with the Gareth Edwards one. It's a serious message piece, and it's the wrath of nature incarnate in this giant beast that is rampaging through cities, causing wanton destruction. Cool. Second film. It's now the hero, and he's fighting on our side. He's going to punch the bad guy in the face. And there are two fans of Godzilla films. There are ones who want the serious, sort of dramatic, not satire as such, but very much the poignant analysis of humans and our relationship with nature. And there are those who want to see a monster getting punched in the face by another monster. Now, you can enjoy both, obviously, but there is a separation. And the first film always does this, and the second goes to being wacky as hell. I don't know why, it just seems to be...
I want the satire, and Dave wants the monsters punching each other. I think that's the...
That's good. That's nice to have a mix like that. That's good. Because again, these films provide that. And they all do. No matter who tries it, they all get there eventually. So Shin Godzilla is another reboot, basically. So Godzilla's been going since 1954, and the way that the Japanese calendar works is that eras are marked out usually by emperors changing over. So there's the Showa era, which is sort of the old school stuff. It's the Heisei, which is more of the 80s and 90s, and we're on the Reiwa era at the minute. And Godzilla's had various reboots, basically, where it's, it goes down to like, Son of Godzilla into a very dark path with this really kid-friendly, human-sized Derpzilla character of, I think it's Manila in the original. It's called Godzuki over here and things like that. There's all kinds of really sort of silly trope stuff. Like, who is the audience here? Because originally it was a scientist with an eye patch saying, I'll happily sacrifice this technology because it can't be falling into human hands because we created the atom bomb and I created this beast. That kind of thing. And Shin Godzilla goes back to that. So in 2016, or 2014, 2 years before, we had the Garth Edwards American one, the legendary Godzilla, which I personally really enjoyed, but a lot of people couldn't go on with because, that's slow. It's only good in the last hour the monsters start punching each other. But that, again, much like the original Godzilla, he appears, the shark in the box in Jaws. He comes out once very briefly, he comes out once again, attacks on the shore, and then finally has this big rampage through Tokyo. And that's the same thing we have with the Gareth Edwards one, which with a bit more with the Mutos. Now, Shin Godzilla, again, same formula. Disaster, teased a bit, keeps teasing a bit, and then finally big blowout at the end where you get the things you see in the gifs on Twitter with this giant purple rays and Tokyo just a sea of fire and like, oh my god, the destruction is intense. It's like, how are we going to stop him? Let's drive all the bullet trains into his face. Oh, this is intense. This is so stupid. It's amazing. So the creators, Shinji Higuchi, who did the direction side of things, and Hideaki Anno, who's also the director, who worked on things like Evangelion, huge anime in Japan, very, very influential for a lot of people, especially our age. And he's notorious for not doing what people necessarily think or want him to do. I mean, people are like, oh, Rian Johnson turned things on his head. Bugger that. Anno does what he pleases on his own time. And it takes so long to get these things done. So it's a film that is, okay, if I describe it in a very loving way, first of all, it's really good. And it is about how the Japanese government operates. And it's a criticism of...
That's true.
Yeah, of how... And the idea of constant meetings, the bureaucracy, not getting anything done, lying to the public, literally turning and saying, wait, what? And being caught out in the moment. And obviously, as we are now living through a pandemic, we've seen these things happen again. And it becomes far too prescient and familiar.
I said to Dave, because I watched this before Dave did, and I said to him, it's like The West Wing, but instead of written by Aaron Sorkin, it's been written by Saban, and so it's like Power Rangers West Wing.
Yes, that's a pretty good description. That wasn't really explained, and also the idea that the way that people might not realize, but after World War II, Japan is not allowed to have an army. That was one of the sort of stipulations of surrender. They have a sort of defense force, so they have to keep asking America for permission. So hence the whole like, what do we do? Can we go into? Can we investigate? Can we bomb it? It's like no. We have to get the Americans involved. We have to get the council involved. We have to get the opinion from. And it's like, what are you doing? And friends who live in Japan, for example, will tell you the bureaucracy of just literally applying for a TV license kind of stuff. Any form you have to fill out. It's less so because of the pandemic now, but the Hanko stamp. So the idea your signature over here is kind of like, I'll sign a contract and do it digitally. In Japan, you have a small red stamp with a sort of like a logo or a kanji figure on it. And you use that to sign checks, you use it to sign documents. And if you lose it, you're in a lot of trouble because then you can't sign anything. Wow. You can't just do a little squiggle on a page. What? And also the idea like, well, surely that doesn't work because if someone steals it, I don't understand. But again, tradition dictates we have to do it in a certain way, in a certain procedure. And obviously being Britain, we're the same way. But that stuff is reflected in this movie where they're saying like, what would happen if this awful, awful experience was happening outside your window and you could literally see it? The public were filming it, but you were like, no, I haven't had a report come through and we haven't had 2 meetings. We'll go to the next meeting room and we'll then discuss it some more. And that level of anger and frustration that the audience would have had going, I understand this. And that's why in 2016, I don't think it chided well with an audience then. But knowing now how we've seen coronavirus being sort of handled across the world, especially in this country, and you're like, well, obviously, we're going to say that we're going to do this, shut things down, open things up. Oh, God, it's all gone to hell, that kind of thing. That mindset may make it a bit more, shall we say, land better with an audience now than it did, say, like 5, 6 years ago. So yes, it's the story of Godzilla's this beast comes out of the sea. They don't know exactly what it is, but it's probably because of the idea of dumping nuclear waste, etc., etc. We haven't done things right. It crawls on land. It evolves is the wrong word, but some fans tend to use. But it has different forms where it adapts to the land. It's bleeding from its gills and it stands upright for the first time. Then it retreats back into the sea. It's gone again. Comes back as this behemoth. And it's not that it's a malicious, malevolent force. It's just moving forward and you happen to be in the way. And that's bad enough. But getting to my sequel specifically, I love a Godzilla with a message. If the message is monsters bad, fight monsters, fine. That's I'm okay with that. But I like it to say something. And Shin Godzilla, ends on a really interesting note. Like the 1951 film, The Day the Earth Stood Still, the original, not the Keanu Reeves film. I love that movie in general, but I love how it ended. That movie is an alien comes down. It's First Contact, if anyone hasn't seen it. First Contact, aliens come down, and they're like, take me to your leader. And of course, classically, they shoot at it. And Klaatu, this alien who has sort of humanoid form, goes on a wander, basically. And he talks to a kid, and he goes around Washington, and he talks about, how it's a very strange place. And he talks to this scientist, and he sort of understands the world, how it is. And they realize that Gort, this giant machine, this robot man by the ship, is powering up, that if Klaatu doesn't come back and say the specific phrase, that he will just basically incinerate the planet. And then Klaatu, as he goes, there's this wonderful speech where he basically says, look, I came here to invite you to this galactic federation of planets and stuff like that. You're going to be welcomed. But as you are at the minute, you're basically on a warning. Because there are so many things that could exist on this planet. There are so many things that don't have a hateful, warring, and obviously it's so far close to World War II, and Korean War is currently going on at this time in America. It's making a message of like, you need to stop. And the idea that the 2008 remake was the idea of getting climate change. You are going to kill this planet. And if you don't stop, I will wipe you all out. Because we are a benevolent higher force, and you are children. And humans never get on with that. Like The World's End, the Edgar Wright movie. The defiant, like, piss off. That's our plucky attitude. But the truth is, I think if the Day the Earth Stood Still hadn't been a remake, but an actual sequel where like, oh no, Klaatu's come back. I said, I told you to change. And that's where Shin Godzilla kind of ends. It's this like, we did it. We did all our resources. We got this thing. We froze it into this giant, petrified beast that stood still. Great. We're great. Humans are awesome. We will never actually need to change because we got over this problem. Again, classically humans, we got over this awful, awful experience. Will you make the small changes to make it better? Piss off. But then you see the tail, and that's the terrifying thing about the end of Shin Godzilla. And it's just like, and that's Arno all over as a director and a writer and a creator. So you see this giant monolithic statue of this dead Godzilla and think, oh wow, that's cool. It'll just probably sit there forever. It's like, is he dead inside there? Yeah, sure, it's cracked. It's dead. And you see the tail, because it's an obscene tail. It's obscenely large. At the end of it, peeling off in almost like I mentioned the thing earlier, in a way of like self-preservation, self-division, are these humanoid-looking beasts with sort of like, peeling off, and there's this terrifying music, and it just cuts to black, and like, wait, what? Because we almost, it was trying to sort of get away. It was trying to save itself. So in terms of a sequel, I would love to see where you go with that, because you couldn't just do another big monster movie. You could try. I mean, the natural evolution is you get another big monster, and you bring in King Ghidorah, and you bring in King Kong, or who the hell ever, and you punch each other in the city, and it's great fun. And again, I should point out, Godzilla vs. Kong, I really enjoyed that. Yeah. It was fun. It was stupid, but it was great fun. I really enjoyed that. But you couldn't really follow Shin Godzilla up with that kind of movie, I don't think. Because again, Arno's very much about that message. And it would be just the idea of this extra thing. I think there's art books have been released about how that was just one of 8 forms. It was going to split off. The reason the tail's so large is because technically it's already self-dividing. There's another Godzilla in there, basically. It's going to split off and be multiples that are going to just sort of like, it's almost like a drop ship for tons of these beasts. Kind of like Cloverfield in a way. And it would be this very different. And the idea like humans can't stop this. This is coming because of what you've already done. It's not like, oh, here's the adversary. It's like, it's going to keep changing and evolving. Like, we stopped the forest fire. Great. Have you stopped what causes forest fires? No. Shit, there'll probably be another one then. Nah, we're all right. We stopped the forest fire. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So again, I find what could be fascinating, because it would have to be Arno coming back, which means it would never happen, because that man, he's so slow. I get it, because what he produces is great. The Evangelion movies, he's like, I'm going to redo Evangelion. And the 4th one has only just come out in Japan in April this year. We still haven't got it over here. I think we get it in August or September on Netflix or something like that.
Okay.
But the first one, he did, I want to say, in 2007, after the series ended in 2001 or something like that. And I was like, what?
I remember the series when I was like a teenager, like a late teenager, I think.
Sure. It was a 90s thing that carried on in the 2000s. And said, oh, I want to do it again. I want to do the ending again. And it's like, 3 or 4 years off the bat. But then each one...
The ending was odd.
The thing is, it always is odd. And this is his most, if anything, cohesive ending. So it'd have to be him. But there's weirdly enough, Toho, who owns the rights. This is where it comes back to like with Marvel and everything else, and Warner Brothers companies moaning about rights. So Keiji Ota works for Toho's Godzilla Council because, again, of course, there's a bureaucratic council which decides how everything works for a character like Godzilla. And Toho, who own the rights to it, say, we're going to do this film. And they couldn't do they could kind of do one Godzilla film that was different enough to the Legendary stuff. The rights at Legendary reverted back at 2021. So now, basically. And they're saying, well, we want to do a big old... Basically, what everyone's doing. We want to do Marvel. We want to do a shared franchise. We want to do the monster universe, the Toho universe with Ultraman and everything else they can get out of that they have the rights to. Because of that, and because of Arno, and because everything is, this is a sequel that it literally is a dream sequel. This is never going to happen. We are never going to see this movie, even if it's fan petitioned or whatever it is, and it's big for a certain part of the community. But Godzilla as a thing has evolved in phrasing, excuse the pun, has changed in so many different times in so many different ways, from animated versions to reboots and things, that they don't go back and fix it up. It's like, oh, you know what I really want to see? I want to see the Heisei era come back. It's like, no, we're not doing that. I really enjoyed the animated ones they did recently, the Planet Monster. Sorry, the Monster of Planets and Eater, or whatever it's called, the Netflix ones. Can we do more of them? No, we're moving forward now. We're doing Singular Point, which is an animated series. Okay, fine. And you get more of it, but it's always different. So that's my overview of why it's interesting. I'm ready for your questions.
This movie makes so much more sense now you've just explained it to me. Like, I think I read up about it after I watched it, and I was like, now this kind of... I didn't even understand the freezing.
Yeah.
So I was like, the freezing thing, the drug they were going to give him was going to shut down his internal cooling system. I was like, how does he freeze if you shut down his cooling system? Surely he gets hotter. But then it turns out that he's basically got a nuclear reactor inside him.
That's it, yeah.
And I should say, rather than him. And so that causes the nuclear reactor to overcompensate, essentially, and that's why he freezes.
Yeah.
I felt like this movie was from 1960. So I said to this, I had to check. I was like, no, it's got drones and they've got mobile phones in it. It's not an old movie.
Yeah.
And then I watched it and I was like, it's so rooted in that, and that makes sense.
We watched a dubbed version. Is that the...
Ooh.
Yeah.
That was a mistake.
Well,
watching the
I'm going to
dubbed
say that was a
version,
mistake because none of the voices went with any of the people, and it sounded like South Park for most of it.
Well, here's
I love the fact that they give you a little caption under each person when they first speak.
Yes.
So that you know who they are and what their job is.
Yeah.
That's so Japanese.
Very much so. There's a director who did a thing called Battles Without Honor and Humanity, I think it is. It's a big. It's called the Yakuza Papers in the 70s. A very cool thing. And he went on to direct Battle Royale, and both those movies have big bang student number this. This is this person. They're born here. This is where they're from. They're from this clan of the Yakuza. This is what they are. Okay, now I understand, and I'll forget all of that in 5 minutes because there's so much I'm trying to take on anyway. But at least it's something. Now I have no problem with dubbed films because it's a way to get into films you're not used to. However, if you're not watching the original performance, it's very... I mean, for example, if you watch an old Sergio Leone film, the Italians dub everything, even though it's them dubbing it again. It's like, wait, what? So it's very confusing. Everyone's saying their own language. But with this film, the performance that the person is giving is better than the one that's in the dub. I mean, it's not like it's an animated movie like a Ghibli film or something like that, or even like a Pixar movie, because then you can redub that and it makes sense in a way, as long as the voice lines up. For example, Mads Mikkelsen is the voice of Randall in Monsters, Inc. in Denmark, and I'm like, that doesn't fit to me. I mean, maybe it does, but that's... Steve Buscemi's such a distinct voice. But anyway, so while I'm saying all that, this film has a lot of moments where Japanese actors are meant to be American or of half sort of Japanese descent and half American descent. And fuck me, the line delivery is terrible. It's very much a case of well, the government's not... It's like, I can kind of make out just what you're saying. And it's not... It's the same way that, whenever, at the start of Valkyrie, Tom Cruise is speaking German, you're like, yeah, maybe better if you just said it with a German accent rather than doing this because all the Germans are frowning. It just, all the inflection delivery isn't there. It's nice to hear it, but also sometimes you want that subtitle. So even if it's in English, it might not. Did
they also, are there parts spoken in English in this film?
Yes.
They also dubbed into other languages in the dubbed version. It got very confusing. But my main problem is with the eyes of the beast.
Yeah. Godzilla's a weird-ass design, isn't it?
And his little arms that don't move.
Oh, and the fact that his head moves and then the lasers coming out of his mouth don't move.
I liked the design of his jaw. I thought that was very clever.
Well, okay, so to answer that question, I would say, again, it comes down to... Like anything, when you have a translator saying this is what this means, if you watch anime, for example, you have on the bottom of the screen, you have white text and that's what's being said literally. And then a lot of anime, on the top of the screen, you have yellow text. And that says what it actually means. And it's explaining the inside jokes. In the same way that being British will appreciate this. We grow up on American films. And we always say, like, oh, what's your favorite film? This. Do you like foreign films? No, I don't like them at all. But your favorite film's an American film. I don't understand. That kind of thing. Because we sort of adopt it as our own culture, as it were. And so when you grow up with references in Ghostbusters to characters, places, and products that we don't get, you kind of just go along with it until it becomes absorbed by the culture. You go, Robitussin, of course. I know what that... Because you're sick. Robitussin, obviously. What the fuck is Robitussin? That kind of thing. It's to them, it's, it's like, oh, Horlicks. Oh, yeah, that's a chocolate thing over here. But for anyone else outside of Britain, I don't know what that is. That's the thing. So you not only need the translation, you need the cultural translation. And Shin Godzilla specifically, has tons of it. It's why Parasite, which won the Oscar, they were sort of convinced it would be a very South Korean movie. Because it's about disparity between rich and poor, everyone can relate to that. That's easy. That's a thing that gets across. With Shin Godzilla, the idea of the design is frustrating because in our cinema in general, we want something that's going to look cool. In general. So the Gareth Edwards version, big, burly, behemoth, wide thighs, big looking, angry lizard frowns and stuff like that. Yeah, it's an adversary, an oppressive adversary. But with this version of Godzilla, it's meant to be a sort of almost disgusting, appalling beast. Whereas Shin Godzilla is very much meant to be, at least from the perspective of the creators, something that isn't cool. It's meant to be something that's meant to be ugly. And again, if you talk about, the sort of burn scarring from nuclear radiation and stuff, it's meant to be dripping with blood and disgusting and pustular and scabbed over and almost volcanic at times. The problem is, as much as I get that, and if you go back and watch things like Evangelion with all the various angels and Avas, as they're called, it has an element of that sort of visceral, disgusting, creepy stuff. But it's also dumb. It's also really, Godzilla at the end is like, I remember seeing the initial design, thought, that looks so shit. Oh, it looks really stupid. But I like it because I like the film. And you get that with a lot of scores, musically speaking, where you go, I don't think I like that score. It didn't really stand out to me. You hear it separately, but you see it with the visuals, you go, God damn, I love that.
What is with the music at the end of this movie?
Again,
what is the score about?
The score it's trying to marry up a lot of stuff with nostalgia, i.e. the classic 50s and 60s Godzilla stuff. It's trying to do what has been done in Evangelion with the big heavy drums and the sort of almost jazz-like element. Precisely. And at the same time, you have to remember that Evangelion, despite being this thing that was, it's like, it's a world-ending thing where there's big robots, which are sort of alien things that are being piloted by kids. It's really existential. It's really terrifying, and it's amazing and get away with it as terms of like family, in terms of entertainment. And how do you end credit that? Let's do a cover of "Fly Me to the Moon." The Sinatra song? Yeah, let's do that. What? Yeah. And Japanese films tend to do that. Like, this is a good song. Is it tonally going to fit? Fuck no. But put it in there because it's cool. It's like, oh, Jesus. I like a lot of the score. I think some of the score works, but a lot of times you go, oh, this feels like a deviation. So yeah, that's
absolutely,
yeah, and it's
like really jaunty, and that's like
yeah,
this doesn't work.
Yeah, it should be this harrowing sort of like but did we really stop it? That kind of walk out something. Oh god, and the way Infinity War ends, that's sort of like, wait, no, what? And it's got this really bleak sort of feel to it. It's funereal, and it should have that. But I think I remember watching Death Note, the live action adaptation of Death Note, which is a manga and an anime, in the cinema, and it ends with the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication because they like that song. And it's like, this doesn't work for this thing about Grim Reapers and people writing notes and killing people. This isn't thing at all.
Recently, when Zack Snyder used Zombie at the end of Army of the Dead because it's got the word zombie on from the Cranberries, and it's a very different song from what he thought it means.
Zack Snyder's the most on the nose. I remember him using Nick Cave in the Bad Seed, during the Aquaman scene in Justice League, his version of Justice League. I'm like, this doesn't work. Why is this work? Oh, it's a song about being.
There we go.
Oh, sorry. It's as surface level as it gets. Okay, fine. And that's just his style, and it goes part of it, and that's something. But again, without that translation, you need someone there to say, it's okay. He usually does this. And the lyrics mean this. Oh, I see. Is that meant to be clever? I mean, it's supposed to be. That kind of thing. That's where you end up with it. But yes, this is very much a product of Japan. And it's made for a Japanese audience with no apologies. In the same way that I really like film like KGF, which is a Bollywood film. that makes no apologies. That's making it for one audience and one audience only. It doesn't care if you're understanding what's going on. We're going to break into song. Why? Because he just broke out of this cool thing where he's being held hostage and he's going to kill these guys. And now he needs to sing about it. What of it? How do you know he's cool unless someone's singing about it? That kind of thing. You need someone next to you saying, this is because of this, and there's a long history of it. Like, oh, I see.
And that's kind of what I felt about this movie. I felt like I don't have the background notes.
Yeah,
for
Matt,
this.
you've described the whole meeting
for this,
which was most my problem, beautifully.
Yeah.
I was like, why are they in another meeting?
I understand the movie a lot better now.
And that's the point. I remember watching this in the cinema, and I remember hearing the same reports in America where people were literally like, derpy Godzilla comes out of the scene, he's flopping all over the place with his big bulging eyes, and like, oh, this looks dumb, bleeding all over the place. And then at the same time, it's like, right, we're going to go to the council room from the meeting room to have another meeting. And I was like, well, make sure we got our official, wearing the appropriate clothes, and they all change into jumpsuits. Why? Because it's a disaster relief. We wear these things for disaster relief. It's like, do we have time for this? Yes, we have time for this. To the meeting room and hold a press conference. And it's like, people are laughing in the cinema, watching and thinking, this is fucking stupid. How is this meant to be highly rated in one of the most successful films in Japan's history? This is stupid. And then you go, well, actually, it's meant to be a cutting look at how Japan doesn't deal with these things because it's so busy trying to be on performance for, we must observe all the proper way of doing things. Yeah.
I kind of got that at the end, I think, because I said to Dave, it's not the West Wing. I was wrong. It's the thick of it. It's not. It's a piss take.
Yes.
It's not it's not a recreation.
Would your sequel lean into that, or would you have less meetings and more fighting with little things that are coming off the tail that you want?
I think you'd have to. Okay, put it this way. I think what you'd have is the same genre change as Alien and Aliens. You'd start off with this weird bureaucratic kaiju film, and you'd have to change to a survival horror zombie alien style movie. You'd have to go like that because if you are implying that this giant beast is just a ship, is literally just going to crack off from itself and produce another version, and in its enormous tail is in fact tons of little versions which are, from our perspective, 10 foot tall, running through the city, and literally, and it's a big monster. We can get away from it, sort of, and we can contain it, sort of. But little versions that are fast and everywhere. God, I mean, I know I'm also describing the 1998 Godzilla film people don't like, but but that's kind of the point. You do have that. How we've dealt with this big problem, but don't worry because we can hide from it because it's big. It's like, yeah, but where are you hiding? Oh, I'm hiding in this bunker, in this house, in this place. Well, they'll get you there too, because it's the idea of it would keep up the bureaucracy to a degree, but probably not to the point it was, because the film's own, while it's having a commentary about our own universe, it's also having its own internal arc. So the people who are responsible for these things have acknowledged that this was the wrong move. We should have dealt with this beforehand. We should have, hubris has taught us we need to be different. And then if there is a next time, we will deal with it differently. So I think that's how that sequel would have to look.
I love the fact that there's a scene where there's kind of a shot of TVs in a TV shop. And I was reading about this after. I was reading up about the film after I'd watched it because I wanted to kind of try and understand it a bit more.
Sure.
And I basically said that every TV in this TV shop is showing live news footage of Godzilla, apart from one. And the reason is because there are 6 channels in Japan, and the 6th one never shows news. Yeah. Like it never deliberately does not show news. And so all these channels, even if something crazy is happening, it wouldn't show it. Yeah. And so that's why it's like got something different on this channel.
And that's exactly, it's entirely a commentary, because the idea would have been that this particular channel, even in the area where the Fukushima power plant disaster was happening, even whether it would have been really important to tell people, it's like, well, no, because we don't do that. Yeah. Maybe you should have. And it's all a commentary. And again, I do think that if you look at how Japan has dealt with the pandemic, with obviously significantly lower numbers, but bad, and obviously they're still trying to get the Olympics going. Christ, how's that's going to go? They have actually moved things along. So, for example, Japan for a long time didn't have contactless or even chip and pin. It was cash. It's a cash-centric country. But because of the pandemic, you don't have that choice. You have to get on board with this stuff. You have to change. And with the rollout of the vaccine in Japan, they're doing a really good job. They're doing, I think, like 1 million a day over there. It's obscene. They're planning to be vaccinated as fast as possible because they seem to have learned from these previous experiences. So again, any sequel to Shin Godzilla we've said about the cardinal sins of sequels in general. You can't just ignore what came before, unless you are doing it for a very clever reason. Or if you are doing it because you can justify that, fine. You also can't just repeat the same film again and just do oh no, another derpy beast from the sea has come out. It's like, oh great, I've seen this movie and I've seen it done better. So yeah, it would have to move on, just for the fact that plausible deniability. Plausibility of the film. You have to say that these characters, if they are to be believed, and suspension of disbelief, if these characters are to be believed as human, surely they would have learned from last time. This thing is almost like a monument in the middle of Tokyo to say. Of literal hubris. You have to say that this is, a lesson has to be learned here. But then again, we look at our own society. If you're going to make a sort of cutting take on how things have been handled in the pandemic, you can turn around and say, yeah, no, you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over and over. So again, if Britain...
We can open up now, it's fine.
That's the thing. If Britain made this kind of movie and made it a zombie film, it's like, okay, everyone's been bitten, but it's fine because Gary over there, who we've just let in, and I know he was bitten, but he's a good guy, so we're leaving him in. It's like, no. Are you mad? Also, I know the zombies are out there. We just have to live with the zombies. No, we don't have to live. What are you doing? We have like a zombie cure thing going. It'd be like a couple. It's like, no. I've had enough of being inside. So
yeah,
but if you do,
we've got to get back to normal at some time.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll just do it now.
And that's the point. And if you introduce that into like a horror or a fantasy or a science fiction kind of movie, and you don't have that background knowledge, it'd be like, that's just, no one would do that. That's stupid. And again, as probably yourselves having that exact reaction of watching the movie saying, another meeting room, this is stupid. No one would do this. It's like, well, actually, historically they did.
Wow. Well, that's taught me.
Well, no, it's part of the failure of the movie. Because much as I love it, it didn't have any explainer scenes. And I mentioned about Wrath of Khan. You don't have to watch this the Space Seed episode or really the motion picture to enjoy it. Shin Godzilla, you can enjoy it just because it's a big monster, and big purple light beaming through everything and cutting buildings and off. That's cool. But to really enjoy what it's trying to say, you have to have someone with a small book. You have to have a nerdy git like me next to you saying, hey, are you enjoying the film? I am, yeah. Do you want to know some stuff about it so it makes more sense?
But also, you've got to respect it because it didn't pander to that audience. It made it for the Japanese market. If that was made in America or here, we would try and pander to the Asian market.
Oh, entirely, and that's the point. It's making it for an audience, but it's still with a bit of a grounding, with a bit of almost like an introductory scene, saying, "Hello, everybody. I'm the director. This is what I intended to do with it. This is a bit of an explanation." And I think that's something that doesn't get across. I mean, yeah, okay, Godzilla can look really stupid at times. This film was made for $15 million. 15 million. That's crazy low. Considering the I mean, yes, okay, some of the CG obviously is very questionable and 5 years later and things, and not all perfect, but just the destruction in general and what's been achieved on 15 million, where if you get like a 45 or $50 million film, it's kind of unheard of. If you get like a small independent movie of 2 or 3 million, and these get these directors up from nowhere, like Trevorrow and Josh Trank and things like that, and Gareth Edwards, and say, right, here's $200 million. It's like, no, give them an on-ramp to these things, see what they can do with that kind of money.
Yeah.
And what's been achieved with that kind of money, it's insane. But again, you have to have, going into this, just so you know, it's a really cheap movie, but what they've done with it is amazing. But also, here's a load of cultural stuff about Japan. Now enjoy the movie.
That was Matt from the Sequelisers Unequal Sequels.
That was very interesting.
Yeah. And if you like this episode, we've got part 2 of our Sequelisers crossover coming next week, when we talk to Tim from the Sequelisers and we get his choices, which are really good.
I found that chat with Matt really interesting, to be honest. I learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, what I love about this podcast is I get to watch movies I've never seen before, and not only have I never seen Shin Godzilla before, I've never even heard of Shin Godzilla before. So, it was really good to know that, and also to learn
why,
like the background and stuff about it. Yeah, why it works.
Yeah, because I was going in for a hot takes of just me slagging that film off, and then everything he explained was like, oh, that's why they chose to do it like that, because in their culture, that's what would happen. I still don't like the design of Godzilla.
No, I was just about to say that. I still don't like what he described as the derpy Godzilla. Like, that is still crazy, but
it's good. And then another person who didn't like Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I think that goes for a lot of people, doesn't it? Really. So I think it'd be nice for us to get on the Sequelisers podcast now. They've been on ours. I think we want We want to try and make our way on there and pitch for a sequel, pitch for a better version of a crap sequel. I wonder what we could do, Dave. What could we pitch?
We could pitch a better Alien vs Predator film.
Oh, yeah. Or a better Batman and Robin. That wouldn't be hard. I basically just have to, show the bat signal for, 2 hours. It'd be better than Batman and Robin.
So, if you liked Matt, go check out Sequelisers on Twitter. And they're also on the internet like we are. They've just finished their latest series. And they did a 4-hour episode. I think it's 4 hours by the time it's come out. 4 hours Sequelisers episode of Rise of Skywalker, which I'm really intrigued to listen to be honest. I really can't wait to check that one out. I think it'd be interesting to see what they come up with because they're all fans of the saga, so it's going to be really good.
Yeah. It's going to go in my pile of things that are 4 hours long
along with
I need
Justice
to
League.
partake in, along with Zack Snyder's Justice League. There's more chance of me listening to the 4 hour long Sequelisers podcast than there is me watching Justice League, I have to say. Because I can listen to that while I'm in the car.
That's true. You can't do that to Justice League.
So, no, not so much.
If you want to listen to our podcast, we're on the internet at all your favourite podcasting platforms.
And you know that because you're listening.
You're listening, but so, if you want to tell someone and say, yes, they're on Spotify, or yes, they're on Apple Podcasts, and yes, of course.
Tell your nan, because we're really nice boys and she'll love us.
We've got actually some 60+ listeners, it says on our charts, but I'm pretty sure that's my mum and dad. So,
well, that's still nice.
It's still nice.
That's still very nice.
Thanks, mum and dad. We're on Twitter as well, if you want to follow us on Twitter, at Unequal Sequel, and we're on Instagram at Unequal Sequel.
Yeah, we've got an email address too. So
unequalsequel at hotmail.com. Yeah, if you want to hate us, that's fine. Or if you just have a comment, please get in touch.
If you're a really big fan of Batman and Robin and you want to send us some abuse for disliking it, then, go for it. The email's the way to go.
Feel free. Check out our other episodes. They're all online. Check out the Baywatch pods on Twitter, and we're also on all the podcasting platforms.
Really hot. I've lost about 5 stone today, just in sweat. And to be fair, the stature of man I am, I can afford to lose that, so it's fine.
I'm very short. I don't want to get any shorter.
Thank you very much for listening. It's a goodbye from him.
Bye-bye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Bye!